What's up, guys, and welcome to a special divisional round episode of Player Pool. Going to dig into the 4 games of the divisional round and give you options for the entire slate, as well as the Saturday slate and a showdown slate. And it's looking like it's going to be another national tight end day this week, and I'll get into it right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Player Pool. Got a special NFL Divisional Round Player Pool that I'm going to be breaking down today. And we got some good games, obviously, in this one. And we do have some weather concerns with most of these games, actually. And we're going to be dealing with that, as well as, I'll break down the 4-game slate, which takes place over the entire weekend. I'll break down the Saturday slate, which is a 2-game slate, and also a showdown slate for the Saturday night game in this one. So I got a bunch of different options I'm taking care of in this show, so we don't have to keep pumping out shows for over the next day or so. I just want you guys to have it all in one spot. So I'm going to break it all down in this episode. Make sure to hit the like button before I get into it. I'm looking for 30 likes to put out my favorite picks in the comments section. And make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm looking for 1,600 subscribers. I wanted to get there by the end of last week, and I'm still 40 short of that. So if you guys can hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, that helps out big time. And you want to do that anyways, because when I post my shows and my videos, it's not no set schedule on that. So you want to subscribe and sign up for the alerts to get all this information. So make sure to do that. Make sure to check out my Underdog videos. I'm going to get into Underdog parlay that I really like this week, and I think it's going to be able to get us 64 times our money, and I'll break that down before we get into lineup building. But let's get on with this slate breakdown. Going to be looking at DraftKings contests in this one. It's going to be a pretty good week for DraftKings. I think that the lineups come together pretty easy. The pricing is soft, but there's ways that we can still get different with it. I'm going to go over to injuries first. We can cover that first, and then break down, everything that's going on in the lineup building process. So, looking at the ESPN depth chart, we'll look at Detroit first. Detroit, we're looking at most of their injuries are on the defense. We talked about it like the last few weeks or so. David Montgomery is looking like he's going to be back this week, and he does not have an injury designation, but we don't really know like what his usage is going to be. I would assume that they're going to be using him pretty liberally, actually, because it's the Lions, and that's what they do. I don't think they're going to be using him very sparingly. I think they're just going to give him his normal workload, honestly. But we'll see what happens in that game. That's just my read on what the Lions would typically do in this situation. They're risk takers, and they're gritty. So, I'm sure that David Montgomery is going to get as much playing time as he can handle. If we're looking at the defense, the defense has been decimated. We still got Carlton Davis on IR. We got Alex Anzalone back. That's not good for the tight end of Zach Ertz of the Washington Commanders. And we still got, Liam McNeil, Mekhi Wingo, Aiden Hutchinson, all these big names. Carlton Davis on either IR or just out. We got Ennis Rayshaw, Emmanuel Mosley, like all these dudes just hurt and out still. So there's still a decimated defense that's going to make it Pretty good matchup for Washington. Sets them up to have a potential upset in this one. The Commanders, if you watch my best ball show with Meg, I went over how the division is wide open. Not the division, but the conference is wide open, and any underdog could potentially steal it. And Washington got the big win over Tampa Bay. I was big on Tampa Bay, so I was hoping that wouldn't be the particular upset. It happened to be, and I lost Tampa Bay in all my best ball teams, but it makes Washington advance round against Detroit, and both these teams are very aggressive on fourth down. So it's going to be a very volatile matchup between these two teams, and anything can happen in this one. The way that both these teams are aggressive, like we saw Washington steal several possessions away from Tampa Bay last week with their fourth down aggressiveness, and just anything can happen in this one. And Dan Quinn has that defense playing really well, and they are definitely live. They're a volatile, explosive team, and anything can happen in this one. Noah Brown is on IR. Going to be good for Alameda Zaccheaus. And let's see, on the defensive side, there's not a whole lot on the defensive side that are injured. We got Pollard on IR, McGee who's out, and Owens who's on IR. Other than that, we've seen a pretty clean defense here. The Marshawn Lattimore situation, he came back last week. He played last week's game against Evans. He was terrible against Evans. Evans smoked Lattimore last week, but maybe Lattimore is a little bit more healthy this week when he's facing off against probably Jameson Williams. So it's going to give a difficult matchup for Jameson Williams. Now, this is a high total game. We'll get into all that when we break down the actual game and the players. But this is going to be shaping up to be a good matchup with Detroit's defense entirely injured. Washington's offense will be able to take advantage of that. And then Detroit has the offensive firepower to be basically matchup proof. So I'm not worried about Detroit against this Washington defense, no matter how good they've been playing. But I do think that gives an edge to Washington in the overall matchup. But we'll have to see, how that plays out. So let's see if we go to the Buffalo Bills next. This is the next big game on the slate. This is the Bills versus the Ravens. And as far as injuries, not a whole lot of injuries on the Buffalo side, which is good for Buffalo. We've seen them, banged up throughout the season. Guy Matt Milano was hurt but he is healthy now, and it looks like they got a fully healthy defense. On offense, we saw Ray Davis get that hard hit last week, went into concussion protocol. Not really sure what his status is currently. Looks like he's still in concussion protocol. That's going to be good news for Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson had that monster touchdown last week, and Ty Johnson will be in play this week. I don't see any other significant injuries on this one, so we can move on to the Baltimore Ravens. With the Ravens, Zay Flowers is doubtful. I had seen a report that Coach Harbaugh was saying that he could potentially play, but he's listed as doubtful. So, keep an eye on that news. When it comes closer to lock, we're going to want to have an idea of that news, because that's going to affect a few people. This week, it's going to affect Isaiah Likely, who took a bunch of snaps out wide last week. He was pretty much the leading receiver in regards to snaps out wide. So Likely was the de facto Zay Flowers last week. As far as their defense, we got a bunch of injuries on the defense, a bunch of guys on IR. Amore Davis might be the most significant. Mollett, the nickelback, So a little less depth in the nickelback situation. And we got Ham and Mullen both out as well. So, Baltimore a little bit more dinged up than Buffalo. You got to give the injury edge to Buffalo in this one. Let's take a look at the Houston Texans. Texans, just their offense is just dead. Like they lost Keenum or Keenum, doesn't really matter. They lost Tank Dell. They lost Stephon Diggs. We were missing Nico Collins for a long time. Brevin Jordan and Tegan Quinton Tianero. They lost the rookie tight end is the main one. He's not on this. We're not seeing him on this list here, but the rookie tight end for Houston was actually pretty good, and he is, he's on IR as well. So they lost him for the season, but Dalton Schultz should be busy in this one with the way that the Chiefs are weak against the tight end position, and also basically having no one else to throw to. The attention is all going to be on Nico this week, and that's not going to be good for Nico Collins this week. But it's going to open the door for Dalton Schultz. We even got Robert Woods questionable. We got Joe Mixon questionable. Let's see. Very, very real chance to play. So I'm not sure how serious his injury is, but that makes it sound like it's pretty significant. Aziz Al-Shahir, I think he was looking really shady to play, but it looks like he is just questionable right now. Status would be good news for the Chiefs if he's out. He's a dirty player, and he's just he plays to hurt people, so he's just a dirty player. Jason Petrie still on IR. We got Jimmy Ward on IR as well. That's good news for Travis Kelce and potentially Noah Gray having these safeties out. And that's about it for injuries. But just decimated. Houston is just decimated. They pulled out the win last week against the Chargers, and now they face the Chiefs. I've heard some people talking up the Houston Texans like they stand a chance in this one, but I really do not see them pulling off an upset. I think that the biggest opportunity for an upset this week is going to be with Washington over Detroit, or maybe the Rams over Philly, but I'm leaning more towards Washington over Detroit in that dome environment. With the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously Rashee Rice is on IR. Now, the Chiefs are going to be healthier than they've been all season. They have Pacheco, Worthy, Hopkins, Hollywood, Kelsey, all healthy now. And they even picked up Kareem Hunt and DeAndre Hopkins along the way. Hopkins had been limited. The word is that Hopkins was limited throughout the season because he needed to play under a certain amount of snaps in order for the Chiefs' conditional draft pick that they traded for him to not cash in as a fourth-round pick as opposed to a fifth-round pick. But now that the playoffs are here, I believe that takes the wheels off of DeAndre Hopkins. So that's going to set him up to potentially be a bigger part of the offense, in addition to Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, who's come around towards the end of the season. All these guys are going to be interesting this week. They have a tough defense that they're facing in the Stingley-led Texans, but I do think that these guys can handle that. Patrick Mahomes was drafting him in best ball in the beginning of the season because I thought we were going to see vintage Mahomes with all these weapons. Turns out we might see that in the playoffs instead, and people are sleeping on Mahomes, at least in best ball drafts. So don't be surprised if we see a more vintage version of Patrick Mahomes in this game. Jalen Watson is looks like he's going to be back this week. he'd been on IR, and that was setting up Kansas City secondary as a target for us. So that's not good for that's another bad piece of news for the Texans. All right, so the remaining game is the Rams versus the Eagles. Let's take a look at this injury report real quick. So Blake Corum on IR. Poor guy tore his ACL. I think he tore his ACL. No, the rookie on Carolina tore his ACL. I'm not sure what Corum's injury is, if he tore his too. But he's got an injury that's put him on IR. It's his forearm. So Corum is his forearm. So we'll probably see him next year. Other injuries, we got some injuries to left tackle with McDermott and Leviston. Jackson is also questionable, so that's going to be a weak spot on the offensive line. As far as the defense is relatively healthy, but they're missing Tomlinson, Kendrick, Reeder, Hampton, and Murchison. But the defense played excellent last week against Minnesota. It's a defense that's on the rise, and don't be surprised if they give Philly some trouble this week. Philly, their offense has not been playing that great. We had Jalen Hurts coming back from a multi-week absence due to a concussion situation, and he looked rusty last week. Maybe he'll be a little bit better this week. As far as the rest of the Eagles, we've got a few guys on IR, otherwise relatively healthy. It's not really anything all that significant. As far as the defense, Nakobe Dean is the big one. Like, losing him is significant as a linebacker. I believe he was helping out pretty significantly in the run. Bradbury still on IR. I think he's been there all season. So relatively healthy, except for Nakobe Dean. That's going to be significant for the Eagles, maybe for Kyren Williams matchup, if I had to guess. So let's move on to DraftKings. We're going to be taking a game-by-game look at this. Already talked a lot about Houston versus Kansas City. I think that Mahomes, we could see vintage Mahomes. He is going to be probably under-owned, but look at what he's done recently. 23.7 DraftKings points in 29 in his last 2 games. And that's where we've seen Hollywood Brown come back. This defense, 23.7 DraftKings points against this defense already. So Mahomes, we've seen some nice games out of him towards the latter part of the season. We saw a 24 DraftKings point game and a 28.76 in addition to those ones I just named. Let's see what kind of ownership is on Mahomes. As far as the ownership on the 2-game slate, looking at him as the third highest owned guy. So we get a slight discount on Mahomes on the 2-game slate. As far as the 4-game slate, kind of getting a gauge on him here. Now, there's going to be weather concerns in Kansas City. It's going to be really cold. And Mahomes is the 4th highest owned guy on the slate. So that is going to be good if you want to do Mahomes stacks. But we got weather concerns, and we have a difficult defense that he's facing. So keep that in mind if you want to build these Mahomes stacks. But his guys are going to be cheap. And the off of the Chiefs is going to be underrated just because of everything that they've done this year. They've looked bad, but they did not have all their weapons healthy. So the main matchup for Kansas City is probably going to be in the slot. Houston's been giving up 12.6 DraftKings points a game. We saw McConkey dominate last week, and that is where we might see Xavier Worthy as a guy to target this week with Mahomes. They're giving up 17.3 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, so Mahomes, is going to have a better matchup there. It's just a question of who he's going to throw to. I think it's going to be Worthy and maybe Kelsey. As far as the Houston side, Kansas City's given up 16.6 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. They've been most susceptible to slot receivers and the tight end. And this is where it's going to get interesting for Houston. And this is the first tight end that we're going to be looking at with a good matchup. And that's going to be Dalton Schultz. Schultz against this Chiefs defense, he's going to be set up pretty nicely. He even had his only good week. Well, he's had 2 good weeks, but one of those 2 good weeks was against Kansas City. He had 15.5, so he's already had a good week against them. But CJ Stroud is running out of weapons to throw to, and Nico Collins is going to be covered pretty heavily. He had 13 DraftKings points against Kansas City last time they played. I don't think that that's going to be enough on this slate for his salary. So Nico Collins might be a fade in this one, but I do like Dalton Schultz, and I like John Mechie in this one too. Mechie, he's been getting a lot of targets lately. He just has not done anything with him. He's at 3,800. You can see he got 8 targets last week, 4, 8, 4, like these last few weeks. But, I expect him to be a big part of this game with Kansas City's weakness against slot receivers, and that's where Mechie's running the majority of his routes. So don't be surprised if we see a big game out of Mechie at 3,800. And let's take a look at where his ownership is looking at. He's probably got the best matchup on the slate. And we're looking at him under 6% owned. So you love to see that. John Mechie is a guy that we can keep in our player pools this week. Other than that, I mentioned that I liked Worthy. I like Worthy. Worthy's probably like the best higher priced guy on the slate. He's at 5,200. And look at his targets, 11 targets, 9 targets, coming alive towards the back end of the season. They were starting to use him more like as a short pass guy, kind of like Rashee Rice towards the end of the season, instead of like relying on him being the deep threat. So that helped him out, I think, a lot. But with Hopkins coming back, or with Hopkins likely to get more playing time, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Worthy kind of bump back outside along with Hollywood Brown. Those guys stretching the field, maybe leaving things open in the center of the field. Unless Hopkins takes that wide out spot and Worthy stays in the slot, then Hopkins and Brown are out there, taking the attention on the outside while Worthy and Kelsey eat up in the middle of the field. That would also keep Stingley off of Worthy. I don't think Stingley is going to be traveling into the center of the field. Let me try and get an idea of that. Let's see. I know that FTN puts out a pretty good shadow index. Let's see. Going to take a look at this real quick. See if I can get an idea of any potential shadow situation here. Got to try to find the team here. Stand by, guys. All right. Well, it's not coming up probably because it's the playoffs. So yeah, I can't really give you guys a indication of any better situation or worthy. Um, Hopkins and Brown would likely be the guys dealing with him. I would guess that he's probably going to be on Brown. If I had to guess, that would mean that Hop bit more open. If we look at the tight end situation, like Kelsey, I think he had like something ridiculous, like 17 straight playoff games with a 5 receptions. So, expect him to be, pretty busy in this one, unless, time is caught up with him. But I do believe that we're going to see Travis Kelsey come alive in this one. Week 17, he had 22 DraftKings points off of 11 targets. But we've seen 11 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets, 6 targets, and 13 targets. So he's been targeted pretty heavily. He's had some big games towards the middle of the season, 3-game stretch over 30 or over 20 DraftKings points in each of those. So Kelsey will be in play in this one. On the running back situation, like this is a game where I probably stay away from the running backs, but Houston does not have a good running back matchup. Kansas City only giving up 14.8 DraftKings points a game to the running back situation, and Kansas City, Houston is giving up 18.7, but with Kansas City, we're dealing with a dual-headed running back situation. So if you wanted to take a chance on Pacheco or Hunt, they each have middling matchups. Maybe Hunt would be more interesting than Pacheco in this one. But let's move on to the next game. We got Washington versus Detroit. Washington underdog pulled it off last week, and now they face Detroit in the dome over in Detroit. So, this is going to be an interesting situation for Washington, to potentially pull off an upset. We could see them make a run similar to what Joe Burrow and the Bengals did a couple years ago. That was just a quarterback situation where the quarterback seemed to be playing with a lot of confidence, much like Jaden Daniels is, and that's why I think that they're live in this one. On top of Detroit's defense being banged up, and then on top of that, both teams are super aggressive in the fourth down situations. So I do think that Dan Campbell is going to be facing kind of an equal when it comes to aggressiveness in this one, and then he's going to be facing off against a healthy defense. They do have the home field advantage, obviously, and Jared Goff's experience versus Jaden Daniels as far as their quarterbacks. Just a more well-rounded team in general is the Detroit Lions, but any given Sunday, as we all know, Detroit could fall to Washington here. Now, Washington has the better individual matchups. Wideouts are getting 24.7 DraftKings points a game from the Detroit defense. That's going to set up Terry McLaurin. Slot receivers, 14.9 DraftKings points. That sets up Olamide Zaccheaus. And the difficult matchup for them is going to be against, the tight end situation. Zach Ertz, only 8.3 DraftKings points a game is what the Lions are giving up as far as points to the tight end position. Everything else is go. And, we're talking about a total that is currently at, what do we got here? We got a 55.5-point total. Detroit are 9.5-point favorites in this one, but I don't like them as 9.5-point favorites. I think it's just going to be too difficult of a matchup for them to win by that much. So, but you never know. You never know what's going to happen. Maybe the aggressiveness of the Commanders bites them in the ass, and Detroit takes advantage of it. We don't know how this game's going to play out. We thought, some people thought that Green Bay would have a chance against Philly. I don't know why anyone would have thought that last week with Philly's defense playing the way it has been, but the Packers ended up fumbling on like the first play of the game, and then it was all over from there. But now we have Washington versus Detroit, and we got Montgomery back to join Gibbs. The Commanders have been susceptible to the running back. That's been their weakest spot. They're giving out 21.7 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. That's going to set up both Montgomery and Gibbs to have decent games. See what the Montgomery injury is doing to his ownership. Looking at him, he's still 28%. So, Montgomery is, let's see if that's on the full game or the, yep, that's the entire, for the entire 4-game slate. So, not liking Montgomery at that ownership. I would rather just go with Gibbs. Gibbs is 7,700. It's really not too much else as far as the Eckler might be interesting. Eckler might be interested at 5,100. But I do like the stud running backs on this slate. I think they're all in pretty decent matchups. We got Jahmyr Gibbs against Washington, who's given up 21.7 DraftKings points. We got Saquon versus the Rams, who's given up 22.1 DraftKings points. And we got Henry versus Buffalo, who's given up 25.9 DraftKings points. So all the stud running backs in this one have good matchups. None of the receivers are really popping in this one, apart from Washington's Terry McLaurin, and then the Ravens wide out, who Rashad Bateman, hit or miss type of guy, but it's a high scoring game in that one too. That one's going to be a 51.5 total in that one with a 1.5 point spread. So yeah, with these running backs this week, it's going to be, for me, just try to jam in a couple of those guys at least. If you can jam in 3 of them, like, go for it. But I think that we're going to find value with the tight end position this week, with all the good matchups that we're looking for with the tight ends. Austin Eckler, though, like, you could use him if you need the salary relief. I don't really see a need to go there. Amon-Ra St. Brown. As far as wideouts, the Commanders are giving up 10.5 to the slot, which is where Amon-Ra is running most of his routes, and that's going to be a terrible matchup for him. As far as wideouts, they're giving up 18.9 DraftKings points, but keep in mind Lattimore was hurt throughout most of the recent season, and then I think since he's been with Washington, he might have played like maybe two or 3 games. So got to keep that in mind when you're looking at those numbers for Washington against wideouts. But Lattimore might be washed too, so we might be looking at ineffective Lattimore at this point. But McLaurin, I like McLaurin. He's been a stud with Jaden Daniels, 20 DraftKings points in a good portion of his games, and his basically had the best season of his career this season with Jaden Daniels. So I like McLaurin, especially against this banged up defense. I like Zaccheaus also in the same defense. The Detroit Lions have been a team that we've been targeting slot receivers against all season. You hear me talk about it every time we talk about the Lions. And now Alamedis to Zacchaeus is going to be the one who gets to take advantage of that. He had those 2 weeks a couple weeks ago where he had 24 and 23 DraftKings points. Kind of fell off the last couple weeks, but don't be surprised if we see him come alive again in this cushy matchup. Williams, talked about him. He could beat any matchup, so don't be surprised to see him have a big game. But the analytics say that maybe Jameson Williams will not have a huge game, but he's the type of guy that can beat a matchup like Marshawn Lattimore. Other than that, I'm not really going to chase Diami Brown. He had that big week last week, but I think that pendulum shifts back over to Zacchaeus this week. Don't really see anyone else I'm interested in. Laporta, I am interested in, though. Another tight end with a good matchup. And, he faces off against this Washington Commanders team that has been weak against the tight end position. And Laporta, if you look at his targets recently, 7, 10, 7, 8, 7, he's been getting targeted a lot more. I think he was banged up in the beginning of the year. So he's really, as he's getting healthier, he's getting those targets ticking up. And you can see it in his DraftKings points too. Where he had a 21 DraftKings point game and an 18 DraftKings point game in the last 4 weeks. So that's going to set up Laporta, maybe to be a decent option this week and probably under-owned relative to where he should be. Let's see. Oh, nope. He's the highest owned guy on the slate. So never mind. But he's got a good matchup. So, he's going to be a decent play this week. Let's look at the Rams versus Philly. Before I do that, I'm going to take a drink. All right. So Rams versus Philly. This is another weather concern game. Potential snow game from what I'm hearing. It's going to be cold regardless. Philly's offense has not been playing well, but their defense has been on fire. And we got Saquon Barkley. So don't be surprised if we see, less of this Philly passing game, depending on how much offense that Matt Stafford is able to put up against these Eagles and their tough defense. Looking at Saquon Barkley with that good matchup that I talked about earlier. So Saquon is definitely in play this week. The other good matchup on the Eagles is going to be A.J. Brown. So Brown is in a good spot. So he's a guy that we could potentially have in our lineups against the Rams. Let's see how he did earlier this season. By the way, that matchup for Saquon is the one where he had almost like 300 yards in the game. A.J. Brown did very well in this matchup too, with 109 yards and a touchdown off of 7 targets. So both those guys had big games against the Rams. Let's see what Devontae Smith did. It doesn't look like Smith even played in that game. So maybe that's part of the reason why A.J. Brown had a bigger week. But we're looking at another tight end in a good spot with Dallas Goedert. The Rams, we targeted T.J. Hawkinson against them last week, and he had a monster game. But the Rams are I believe, the highest targeted versus tight end in the league. So teams are actively targeting the Rams for the tight end spot, and we've seen Goddard have a few good weeks. He had a pretty big week last week. Had a nice touchdown run where he pie faced a guy, and just had a huge game last week to help them win their game. But besides that, we've seen a 30-point upside in this season. So, Goddard is going to be in play against a Rams team that's been weak against the tight end position. Tyler Higbee, another big name tight end, but he got hurt in the first quarter, I believe. Before he got hurt, he had 5 targets for 58 yards in like the first quarter. It was like, uh, if you didn't have him in Showdown, you were basically screwed. It was looking that way, but then he ended up getting hurt and taken out of the game and actually going to the hospital. But it looks like his does not have a injury designation for this game, so it looks like Tyler Higbee is all systems go. As far as the quarterbacks, Hurts has not been playing well recently, but when you sleep on Hurts is when he can bite you in the ass. We've seen a bunch of 35-point weeks from him already. If you don't have Barkley in your lineup, you probably want Hurts because one of those dudes is probably going to get in that 30-point range. So just keep that in mind with this week's lineups. I would lean more towards Barkley, but the entire field is going to be leaning more towards Barkley. Kyren Williams is another stud running back. Does not have the best matchup, but Nakobe Dean, as I talked about, let me see something real quick. I want to see what his run blocking grade is. All right, so let's get an idea of what his run blocking grade is here. Run defense, yeah, he's a cold game. He's also outdoors. Expect the running game to kind of take over in this one. We could see Kyren Williams in for a big usage. So Kyren Williams will be played this week. Another stud that's going to be in play. He's able to take advantage of Nakobe Dean being out. Other than that, I think we can move on to the next game. We got Baltimore versus Buffalo. Now, this game is a toss-up. Jackson versus Allen. It's another game with a high total. We're looking at a 51.5 point total. So, anything can happen in this one. Seeing him as being an MVP, but I do think that Josh Allen deserves a little bit more this season. He hasn't won it before, but he's also, taken a team of scrubs to the divisional round of the playoffs. It's just he's working with a lot less than Lamar Jackson is, and I do think that Allen deserves that MVP more than Jackson. But that being said, both these quarterbacks have choked in big games. Lamar Jackson has a huge hex on him in the playoffs. So I don't know what to expect in this game. It could be, whoever screws up or whoever chokes less. It could be one of those situations, or they could both go off in this game. And, we're talking about whoever's able to be the better quarterback. So who knows what to expect in this game, but Josh Allen has the better matchup with Baltimore giving up 19.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position versus 16.4 is what Buffalo's given up to the quarterback position. Buffalo has been weak everywhere else, though. They're giving up 25.9 to the running back position. Good for Derrick Henry. They're giving up 24.7 to wideouts, which is good for, I think, Isaiah Likely, because Isaiah Likely was running the most out wide, and it looks like Zay Flowers is likely not to play. And then we got 16.1 for the slot receivers, so that's going to be good for. It would have been good for Zay Flowers, but maybe that's where Likely takes advantage this week, and Rashad Bateman gets more of the work out wide, more of those DraftKings points out wide. So we'll see how that goes. And then tight end, they're giving up 11.6, but Isaiah Likely, another tight end who I like this week, with that potential to rack up a lot of targets out wide, as they're almost de facto wide receiver one. So, he did not do much last week or the last few weeks, but he's due to pop off for a decent game. We've seen it out of Likely, and the usage was there last week, but they were blowing out Pittsburgh, so they were running the ball instead. But this one should be a more competitive back and forth, and that's where we'll see Likely have a potentially decent game. Other than that, Mark Andrews, similar situation. Andrews could definitely come alive in this one, and Dalton Kincaid. Baltimore is giving up 11.6 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position, so not as high on Dalton Kincaid. Sorry, guys, I've been getting very little sleep lately, trying to record all this stuff at night. Let's see. Other than that, with the running back situation, James Cook, not really a fan of his versus this Baltimore defense, but Cook's gets enough usage so that he could potentially pop off, or at least he's been efficient enough with the usage he's getting so that he could eventually pop off against Baltimore this week. So keep that in mind. As far as the Ravens side, Justice Hill had his biggest game against Buffalo back in week 4. He had 21.6 DraftKings points against them. Derrick Henry in that same game had 38.9. So both the running backs had monster games against Buffalo last time, and they're set up to have decent games in this one as well. So, we'll figure that out when we get into this building here. Now, before we go into building this DraftKings lineup, I want to talk more about the underdog situation. So with Underdog, I put out a video, but I wanted to share this because this is 64 times your money if you win. This one, you want to sign up for an Underdog account using the promo code SEEK, SEEK. They're going to match you 50% up to $1,000. So it's very hard to come by free money, especially that much free money these days. So take advantage of it and join me in this parlay. I only put like $10 on these parlays generally, but I've hit 155 to 55 times your money parlay, and that has been good enough to put us up. If you're using a unit per each of these parlays, and let's say $10 unit for each of these parlays, then you're up about 20 units just following these parlays so far. So make sure to sign up for an Underdog account if you haven't already, just so you can play this one. And this is probably my favorite one that I've had this season because it feels well within reach. The last time I felt this good about a parlay was the one that hit for 54 times our money, and that was when I had Ricky Pearsall as a anytime touchdown scorer in that one, or a rushing and receiving touchdown scorer in that one. And he ended up hitting for us in the first quarter, and then the rest of the parlay was easy from there. But that was a single game parlay. This is a situation where we got a five player pick 'em, and we're looking at Harrison Butker higher than 1.5 field goals made. That's with that tough defense of Houston potentially stalling out the Chiefs closer to the red zone, setting up Butker for field goals. I would not be surprised to see him go over that 1.5 field goal situation. With Sam Laporta, this is where I like these tight ends. I got 3 of them in this particular pick'em. Sam Laporta higher than 48.5 receiving yards against that Washington defense. Sam Laporta's usage increasing recently. on top of Washington not being a very good tight end defense. I think that's going to set him up for higher than 48.5 yards. Dalton Schultz. On top of that, with Laporta, he's hit that receiving yardage in 4 out of his last 5 games. So keep that in mind. With Butker, he's hit it in 7 out of 14 games played this season. He's hit more than 2 field goals. Dalton Schultz, I like him for a receiving touchdown against Kansas City, which has been terrible against tight ends this season. Dalton Schultz is the guy that juices us up to 64 times our money. Without him, if you want to take him out, or if you want to do an insurance on your on your pick'em, then I think would drop you down to 30 times your money if you hit money or guy with like that thing has a pretty good probability of hitting a touchdown, but it's not reflected in how much we get out of that, like how much the odds are of that happening. And Schultz is the one. I think it was like a 3-1 or something they were giving us on that touchdown. But whatever it is, it juices us up to 64 times our money. So that's why I have Schultz as the anytime or the receiving rushing touchdown in this one. With Isaiah Likely, I like him going higher than 39.5 receiving yards, based off of, I think that this is going to be a more competitive game, and he will be more likely to get a bunch of targets in this one, as opposed to last week where they didn't need to target him in that one because they were running away with the lead. But Likely, he ran the most routes out wide last week, and I expect him to do something similar with Zay Flowers potentially out this week, looking like he's going to be out. CJ Stroud, I had him higher than 19.5 rushing yards, and I just think that he's going to be in scramble mode against Kansas City with Nico Collins, potentially bottled up, and then basically Dalton Schultz is the only guy left standing after that, and CJ Stroud could be doing some running this week. So that's the pick'em. Use the promo code SEEK, SEEK, to get a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. Join me on this one. Take the insurance if you don't trust the 5 picks, and just go for 4 picks. But I think it's a pretty good pick'em here. I feel pretty good about it. So check that out. All right, let's go over to the building this DraftKings lineup with the 4-game slate. So quarterback, I think I like Mahomes in this one because the price is low and the ownership is not high. But I think my favorite quarterback in this one might be Jaden Daniels, because Jaden Daniels is, let's see what his ownership is. Jaden Daniels is going to be the highest owned guy in the slate as far as quarterbacks. So maybe not so high on Jaden Daniels. Let's get an idea of some other ones. Daniels versus Goff is going to be a good game tomorrow. And they are both the highest owned guys on the slate. Lamar Jackson's actually coming in at about 10% owned. So his price tag probably plays a role. But let's go with Lamar Jackson. And let's put Barkley, Henry, and Gibbs. Get 3 of those studs in there. Let's go with a tight end. Schultz. is the cheapest guy that I like. Let's get our defense out of the way. I don't mind the Rams defense against these Eagles. They're cheap at 2,700. Texans defense isn't a bad option either. Mahomes has been taking sacks this year. So we're left at about 4K per guy for wide receiver, which is fine because there's not really many that stand out this week. Let's try to put McLaurin in there though. And that is where we're going to see it already like start to hit us. So let's swap this out a bit. Let's put Justice Hill in instead of Derrick Henry, although I like Derrick Henry a lot. And let's go in the flex with a tight end. We can get Laporta in there. Let's put Likely. Let's get Likely in there, though. Let's get Likely in that tight end position. Well, I guess I can leave Schultz in that. In the main one, put Likely in the flex. So let's put Schultz back in there. Let's put Likely in the flex. All right, so I've got 6,700 per guy. All right, so if we're looking at receivers now, so we got Jackson with Hill and Likely. I don't think we need a receiver in there for Jackson. We got Barkley. Not running him back with anyone on the Rams, but we do have the Rams defense. As far as these receivers, I mentioned I liked Mechie. He's at 3,800. That's going to leave us with 9,600. So maybe we can get Henry back in here. No, let's get Gibson there. I don't know why I took him out. So that's going to leave us with 5,400. So that puts us in worthy territory. Who I like: Shakir, Hopkins, Hollywood Brown. I mean, you can take a stab on any of those guys. I think Zacchaeus is going to have a big game. So I like Zacchaeus too. But we already have McLaurin in there. If I put Zacchaeus in there, we're going to want to put in Jaden Daniels. But you can see we've got a decent amount of studs in here. If we go with Worthy, gives us another 200 for a defense. We could go Ravens, Rams. You know, we had the Rams in there. Gives you options at least. So I like that direction for like a 6. I mean, like the 4-game slate. Let's get Jackson out of here, and let's go with Mahomes. Going to be low owned. Let's get Hill out of there. Let's put Henry in. So if I'm starting Mahomes, I want him with two guys. So what I might do, I might take Barkley or Henry out. I mean, this is a rotational situation because all these studs have really good matchups. But let's take out McLaurin and put in Zacchaeus. Let's see what that does for us. All right, so that opens things up. So we can put in. Let's put in that Rams defense again. Some reason I like the Rams defense this week. Let's take out Zacchaeus and see where that can bump us up to. So we got Mahomes to Worthy. Let's put Zacchaeus back in there. Let's take out Schultz and see if we can get Kelsey. We cannot. So let's, you know what? We could get Likely in there. Likely or Schultz. I don't think you can go wrong with either of those guys. But Mahomes, I want with another pass catcher. So I'm going to go with Hollywood. So we got Hollywood and Worthy with Mahomes, running it back with Schultz on the Texans. We got 3 stud running backs. You know, if you wanted to put 2 studs and get a tight end, you could do that too. Let's see. One way that we can change up this lineup a little bit. Let's get Schultz back in there. Let's put Kelsey in. So we want to use him as our flex. Let's bump Hollywood up to St. Brown. That we're looking at Mahomes to Worthy and Kelsey, running it back with Schultz. We got Brown and Zacchaeus back and forth. Derrick Henry and Barkley are one-offs at that point, which I don't mind, given the matchup and the weather concerns that these guys are going to have to be dealing with. So pretty interesting way to go there too. But I do like both those directions. Let's go with a 2-game slate. All right, so the 2-game slate. Let's see how we can do this one. We're going to look at the ownership real quick. This is Saturday's 2-game slates. Make sure to hit that like button. Give me the 30 likes. Hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 1,600 subscribers. Sign up for Underdog. When you guys open up the Underdog accounts, that's what helps me out. Basically helps like keep these shows going with that affiliate relationship with Underdog. So I definitely appreciate that. But if you guys can open up accounts, that is what benefits me. So if we're looking at the 2-game slate, as far as the quarterback, the lowest owned guy is going to be CJ Stroud by far. So let's get a little different on this one. Let's pretend that the Texans make this one competitive. And I think for that to happen, Mixon is going to have to get going. Actually, no, I take that back. I think it's going to have to be Nico Collins. That's where they're exploitable. So let's get Nico Collins in there, and let's put Schultz in there too, because Stroud is going to need 2 pass catchers. On the other side, Worthy. Still like Worthy there. Running backs, I think this is one where I'd want to get 3 studs in. Let's go with Gibbs. I actually 2-game slate. I don't have 3 studs to work with. Let's go with Gibbs and let's give it Pacheco because I think the Texans are playing from behind a little bit here. And I don't think that Pacheco is necessarily going to be huge owned. But we want more Washington, Detroit in this. So we got to keep that in mind. Let's get Laporta in the flex. This is a 2 tight end situation. Let's get our defense here. Going to go with the Gonna go with the Texans in this one. Actually, no, let's not do that. That's gonna steal a possession from us. Let's go with the Commanders. And I think, like, most people are gonna wanna stack that Detroit game, so putting the Commanders defense in there and saying, like, yeah, the game hits the total, but it's because the Commanders defense scored a touchdown, something along those lines. Amon-Ra, I think, makes the most sense to put in here. I like McLaurin too. McLaurin has a good matchup. So, like, I think I'd prefer McLaurin over Amon-Ra straight up. But for the lineup construction, I got Gibbs and I got Laporta. Yeah, no, I think, like, we can go McLaurin in this one. I think McLaurin makes a good amount of sense because we don't have a Washington guy current. Oh, we have the Washington defense, but we don't have a Washington weapon. So I think that McLaurin makes a lot of sense if you want to go that direction. If we want to go on the opposite side and go with Mahomes, let's do the same thing though. Let's do Worthy. Sticking with Worthy. Let's get Gibbs in there. There's no reason not to go Gibbs. And maybe we put double running back in this one. Let's put Montgomery in there too. Washington's defense is that bad against the run. Like, we can put both of those guys in there. Let's get McLaurin as the run back. Let's go to defense and get the Texans in there. Actually, no, not with Mahomes as our quarterback. Let's get him out of there. Let's go with the Commanders D against Washington, or against Detroit. We got Mahomes and Worthy in there. Let's get Kelsey. And let's go double tight end with Laporta. This was 7,600. We can get pretty decent options. Nico Collins or Amon-Ra St. Brown. We don't currently have a Houston run back, so I think Collins makes a lot of sense here. Because if Mahomes is having to throw enough to get him the volume he needs to be in the optimal lineup, then I think Nico has to be responding on the other side to keep pushing that game. So I think I'd go with Nico or Amon-Ra in this one, maybe even Jameson Williams. But you do have options there at least. That's the good thing about this build. So keep that in mind with with this one, the final one of the 4-game build or the 2-game build. And let's go to the Showdown. Going to look at the Saturday night game. Let's go with Washington at Detroit. All right, so the captain options in this one going to be interesting. Okay, so I think the way that I want to approach this one is I want to do it from a Washington wins perspective, because most people are going to be high on the Lions. Now, with Washington wins, I think that Zacchaeus could have a big game against that Detroit secondary that we've targeted, slot receivers against all season. Zacchaeus being the slot receiver, I think that he's going to have a decent game. Let's go ahead and get Schultz in there too. Oops, wrong game. All right, so we got Zacchaeus in there. Let's get Jaden Daniels in there. Let's get Jaden Daniels in there. Let's get Gibbs in there. Looking for high upside guys. or high volume guys with high upside. Leaves us with 7,200 per guy. I don't hate going double running back, but I do like Terry McLaurin this week. So let's get Terry McLaurin in there. Yo, this is one of the few ones where I don't think I like either of the kickers because both these teams are aggressive on fourth down. So let's get Sam Laporta in there. This was 6,800. I mean, this is pretty easy build too. Like we got Eckler, Ertz, those kickers I just talked about. Diami Brown, if you think he was real last week. But plenty of options there. Like if you want to go with that Zacchaeus route, a lot of people aren't going to be comfortable with that. So let's go ahead and get Jaden Daniels in that captain. See what we can do with that. Let's get Schultz. Why do I keep saying Schultz? Let's get Zacchaeus. Let's go with Zacchaeus and McLaurin. Running it back with Gibbs. Still 4,500 each. Let's get Laporta in there. Leaves us with 3,500. And we can go with Commanders D. Jamison Crowder, who's shown some upside. And guys like that. So it gives you a bunch of options. Yeah, and that's it for this show, guys. Going to be putting out some shorter videos for Underdog throughout the day tomorrow, so make sure to check those out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Get me to 1,600 subscribers. I need about 40 left to get there. And make sure to sign up for an Underdog account using the promo code SEEK, SEEK. That's going to get you a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. And you can still get some playoff best ball if you catch this show in time. So make sure to do that. And thanks for watching, guys. Covered a lot of ground in this one. I'll be putting out a Sunday show at some point tomorrow. So subscribe to the channel and sign up for alerts so you get those notifications. And I will see you guys later.